Hi class, let's talk about how to process records in Python. Here is a file, an external file, and it's got some data in it. And take a look at the structure of this data. The structure is organized into records. So a record is simply a collection of data elements or a collection of data attributes that all have a relationship together. So here, we can look at this data file here and see, all right, these go together and these go together, and they just are going to repeat and repeat and repeat depending on how many records we have. But we could say then a single record is going to be all of this right here, and that's going to be comprised then of these three data elements, name, and then a couple of values. So that's what a record is. And it's sort of like a medical record. A medical record is really just one object. It's your medical record. So it's got your name on it. And then it's just a collection of data under it. It's got a bunch of different files and reports and labs and all that stuff. So we've seen records before. In coding, most of our records will be organized this way. And in our external files, we'll be able to see how they're organized and what the data types are. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, there is a for loop that we can use for records processing that makes it all very, very easy, because the for loop will automatically check for the end of file. Now, checking for end of file is something that's usually manually accomplished in programming languages. For example, C++, you have to manually check and make sure that the end of the file hasn't been reached unless you use a special type of a while loop. Python is no different. You can use an automated way with a for loop, or you can kind of manually check for the end of file using a while loop. So both of those are described in the book. I'm only going to go over the for loop, first of all, because it's the easiest. Second, it's the most prevalent in use across the landscape. And it's very easy to understand. If you are interested in the while loop solution, just check out the book. It's right there, and it's on page, well, you can find it. It's on page, you'll have to go look it up. But also for Lab 8.2, I've posted the solution that uses both methods. So when you get that lab and you check the solution, you'll be able to see kind of side by side how the two loops work. But we'll, again, focus on the for loop for all of those reasons. And it's quite easy, given that we have an input file object created, like in file. Well, what we can do is structure our for loop this way: for item in file. And this entire for loop then will repeat on its own and automatically stop when it reaches the end of file. And this is a very marvelous feature, again, because other programming languages make you check for it manually. Here we don't have to. Now, what we have to remember, though, is this very for loop header here is going to extract the first element from the file and assign it to the variable item. So over here in our file, the name has been consumed already. And I'll say consumed, meaning it's been processed and read. So it has been completely read. And now right where that cursor is, that's where the read head is positioned, ready to read the next value. Now, what we have to do is inside this for loop, we have to do additional read operations, one for every remaining data element in that record. Let me say that again. We have to do another read operation, one for every remaining data element. So here we still have these two data elements left, value 1, let's say, and value 2. So that means we have to do two more read operations of some type, okay? And we can code those nice and simple. value 1 equals infile.readline, and we cast the entire thing as an integer. Note, because we cast it as an integer, we don't have to strip the end of string new line. So there's no rstrip method called here. And then when this value 1 is read and it's consumed, okay, this is now done, and the read head is now sitting right here in front of value 2, and we're ready to read that value in. And then we'll do the same code there. And then we would just repeat this for however remaining data elements that there are. Now I've got some code here, and let's take a look at that. I'm going to share my screen. Let's go back to this and let us zoom in here so we can see this stuff. All right, first over here in my in the right-hand browser window, you'll see input.txt. This is my input.txt file, and let's take a look at it. It looks like there are, and I'm going to temporarily separate these out so we can kind of read them better. It looks like there's 4 records, and these are all perhaps database entries from some kind of an auto parts store. The first element in every record is the part name or the item name. The next is the item inventory number. So that's going to be a string. The third item is an integer, quantity on hand. So there's all of the quantities on hand. This is the sales price or the retail price. And then the last one tells what kind of a markup does this item have. In other words, to achieve profit, a business will buy items at a wholesale price and then mark them up some percentage, and that percentage sort of represents their profit sold on that item. So because there's these 5 data elements that we have to read in these records, we know that the for loop is going to automatically read the first one. So our for loop better have 4 additional read operations. And before we do anything, let's just validate that. Okay, here's the for loop header that reads the first item, and there need to be 4 more. And here they are right here. There's a read line, there's a read line, there's a read line, and finally there's a read line. There's our 4 read lines. So this code is going to successfully process the entire database. All right, so here's our for loop header for item and infile. Now that item, the first thing that we read is the item description. And because that's a string, we will have to strip off that trailing new line character with rstrip. This instruction then reads the inventory number, and same thing, we strip it off, strip off the new line character because it is a string variable. The next thing we read is quantity, and we don't have to strip the new line character there because int does it for us. And then accordingly, we will read the price and then again the markup. And then these print statements are just nice and simple. All they are printing out the variables that we had just read. So when we run this, let me get a fresh run in here. You can see here that we've got the output that matches our input.txt file here. And I've got it to where the item description is prominent, and then the data attributes or the record elements for that item description are all tabbed over by one stop and give a little bit of indentation. So that kind of shows what we can do for accessing these. Now from here, now that we've got all this data, we could go and calculate extra things. We could calculate, well, what is the profit on this? So let's try that. We'll do a profit calculation here, and then let me copy this line over, and we will call this profit and put the profit variable in there. All right, and then profit is going to be the difference between the wholesale price and the retail price. So let's figure out the wholesale price. If an item is $50 wholesale and our markup is going to be 10%, then the markup will be $5 and the wholesale amount or the retail amount will be $55 there. So we can just kind of take that backward and calculate that. So I'm going to pause it and finish out the rest of this code. And when I come back, we'll show what all those calculations are. Okay, we're back and the code is complete now. Now if we're given a wholesale price, something that you buy at the store, let's say we buy it for $60. I'm going to use the calculator here to kind of show how these calculations work. And then let's say that there was a 10% markup on that. And from that, we want to derive, well, what was the retail price? Well, normally we know retail price plus the percentage of markup, that's going to equal the wholesale price. If we reverse that, we know that, well, if we divide the wholesale price, if we divide the retail price by 1 plus the markup percentage, well, then we will get the wholesale price. So this $60 is our off-the-shelf retail price, and we know that the markup was 10%. So if we divide this by 1 plus 10% or 1.1, then we will see what the actual wholesale price is. And 54.54 is that price. And that makes sense. So if we bought something business to business, if our business bought it from another vendor for a wholesale price of 54.54, and then we added a markup. Well, if we multiply this then by 1.1, which is the 10% markup, then we get our $60 back. So that's how we calculate that. And that is exactly what this wholesale price calculation is going to do inside of our for loop. We're going to take the price and then divide it by 1 plus the markup. And the markup was entered, of course, as a percentage, as a decimal percentage. Then once we have the wholesale value, then we can calculate the profit. Profit is just going to be the wholesale price times whatever the markup is. That's going to be our profit. So then I added these two into our report, and now our program will process the database and process these records. And now we've got some extra data in there, including for each element or for each item in inventory, what is the profit and what is the wholesale price. Now, here's something else we could do. If we look over here at our input.txt file, we see that we have a quantity on hand, and we have a retail price for each of those. So it might be interesting to be able to calculate, well, what is the grand total net worth of all of the inventory in the store? So why don't we code that, and let's figure out how we could code that. Well, first, this is going to need some type of an accumulator variable. So why don't we call it grand, or not grand, how about inventory value? And we'll always initialize it to 0. So there's our accumulator variable there. And then the way that we'll calculate this is we'll just add them all up inside this loop. What we'll do is we'll multiply the quantity on hand times the price and add that to the inventory value. So we can take care of that. Why don't we do it right here? How about at the end of the program? Or the end of the for loop, I should say. So we'll say inventory value, and we're going to add to it plus equals, and we're adding quantity times price. And then let's also output what the total is going to be. And we'll want to print that outside the loop, not inside the loop. So we'll do some kind of code recycling here. And let's put a $sign in front of that. Just do some extra things here. And then let's run it. Oop, and I got an error. Let me figure out what's going on there. There we go, all fixed now. The issue was over here in my input file. Remember how I had spaced those out just to make the records a little more apparent. I didn't take those spaces out. So our Python interpreter was complaining about that. So I restored those. And you can see here that when we put this extra code in to start to calculate the overall inventory value at a grand scale at the store scale, we will output that here outside of the loop, and then we can see what we get here. The whole inventory value is 9876. Let me take out the tabs, and I think I'll put an extra line in there. And let's run that again. And now we've got the grand total for the inventory. So I hope this helped to demo how to process records. There'll be an extra credit assignment to compile some of the code in the book to make this a grand scheme where we will, in that assignment, just sort of reassemble the code and put a wrapper menu program around it to perform some of those functions. So I hope you take me up on that and try for the extra credit solution this week. Okay, gang, good luck.